Hi, and welcome to Newsmakers, the show that brings together Santa Barbara's top journalists and local political leaders for inside analysis and behind-the-scenes commentary on the most important news events in our community. I'm your host, Jerry Roberts. Tonight, it's our special post-election show as our all-star panel talks about the coverage and fallout of the November 7th balloting. Capping a long and winding campaign, Santa Barbara, for the first time in history, elected a Latina as mayor. In the district races, voters have elected the most liberal city council in recent memory. By a substantial majority, Santa Barbarans decided to raise their own taxes, allegedly to pay for roads. And on the key issue that unites boomers and millennials everywhere, City Hall seeks a new bank that will handle cannabis cash. Our panel tonight, Josh Molina, political reporter for Newshawk. Laura Capps, nonprofit consultant and school board member. Former City Council member and Republican leader Dale Francisco, and Kelsey Brugger, National Affairs correspondent for The Independent. Thank you all for coming. So Josh, Frank kind of underperformed on Election Day. Frank Hotchkiss finished second. Kathy Murillo, the new mayor, further out ahead than we thought. What happened? Was it organization?
Well, I think everyone expected that Kathy was going to come out on top. So that's not a surprise. Like we talked about, the Dems organized really well, hundreds of volunteers, 5 a.m., strategizing, walking, and all of that matters. That's an infrastructure that you really can't compete with when you're already competing with a voter registration deficiency. So Frank underperformed. I think he probably performed about as well as he could, considering everyone who was in the race. I think he did a good job. I mean, he made it close, he made it competitive, he made Kathy work hard, and he came up a little bit short, but considering that this is Santa Barbara, I think he did well. The big problem for Hotchkiss was the fact that he lost a lot of votes from it being such a crowded field of qualified candidates. He lost votes to Angel Martinez, and he lost votes to Hal and Bendy, who people who didn't like Kathy.
Well, 2 weeks out, we had 40% undecided, and Frank got 2.6 of the undecided. The rest of them.
My prediction was that
he had peaked
Yep.
at that time.
Yep.
And Hal, you pointed out that
Hal did really well on election night. Exactly.
Yeah.
So on election night, at least as of 1 a.m, 22.7% of the votes for mayor came in on that last day, on election day. 31% of Hal Conklin's votes came on election day. So he enormously outperformed. There was definitely a surge for him on the last day.
How do you account for that? And why didn't he surge earlier?
I think there's a lot of undecided.
You supported Hal.
I did support him, and I think the independent endorsement really, not only as an endorsement is important, but the way that it was laid out. And so if people were undecided and then you read that, it was so thorough, and the history is so long there. And I heard from just anecdotally, I didn't know that he did that with Stern's Wharf, right? The pieces sort of got filled in. So I think, I can see that. I didn't know those numbers, but if you were undecided at the very end, I could see breaking for Hal with all of that information that was included there.
Where were you on election night? You were out and about.
I was at City Hall for a while until that first batch of votes came in, and then I was at Angel Martinez's.
What was the mood there?
Well, they were upbeat, I think
he was at the Paradise, huh?
He was at the Paradise, and
was Randy giving him the family rate?
I didn't see Randy. I would have asked him.
Randy was at Via.
Okay.
I wondered about that.
Who was at Via, Jay?
Jay Higgins.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the time I got to Viva, it was closed, and then chairs were on the tables. But Angel's, Paradise they were celebrating. I think they felt like they ran a good campaign. He's an outsider. I don't think that they were expecting to win. So
$80 a vote, is that what it cost them?
Well,
Josh, and I read in your article.
Angel, when you look at the amount of money, he should have won. When you think about anybody spending that kind of money for a Santa Barbara mayoral race, where does all that money go? The problem.
Where did it go?
The problem.
To consultants.
Well,
he ran, right? The people who ran Angel's campaign did not run the best campaign they could have, by far.
What do you think?
Well, I think, winning a mayor's race starting from zero with no name recognition whatsoever, that's going to be an enormously expensive undertaking. I saw your numbers, Joshua, $81 per vote,
Yes.
but I think it's a little unfair because you see from how well Frank did in this race how incredibly important name recognition and incumbency is. Those are huge, huge barriers to overcome, and I think Angel did amazingly well considering.
Do you think that Hal would have won had it not been for Bendy's late entry?
I mean, you could look back and sort of add up those votes, but I mean, fundamentally, this was Kathy's race, and she did an amazing
hers
job.
to lose,
Yeah, I mean,
and
but also, you think about it's spending your money wisely, which I'm sure that Kathy did, given the team that she has, and targeting the right voters at the right time, and not going to people who aren't registered, and tracking whether or not they've turned in their ballots and all that. Anecdote, I saw an Angel really slick door hanger the morning of the election on my neighbor's house, and they're not registered there. They're registered in Michigan. So, that just showed me that he's spending money just willy-nilly.
The thing is, to Dale's point, yes, if you pulled somebody out of nowhere and asked them to come in fourth and get 4,000 votes, by that measure, yes, he had name recognition. But this is politics. It's not hard. It's not rocket science, right? And this is a good indicator of what would have happened if he were mayor. Think about what he did. He overspent. He did not spend wisely. And he didn't do the work on the front end. If Angel wants a career in politics, he needs to reverse it.
I don't think he does.
He
Well,
needs
he
to
put a lot of
spend.
I think he's.
And he put a ton of money on social media. You couldn't go on Facebook or Instagram without
Who was he
seeing-
targeting on social
I think
media?
probably the millennials, as I said before on the show, who I've said before don't vote. So, it's,
But of course, that's all you would know, right? That he was
Right.
targeting millennials.
right.
So can a Republican ever be elected mayor of Santa Barbara again? Now that Josh has opened his consulting firm,
Right. I think what we're
We
hearing
make a
is that
good
Josh is going to be running next time. I think that, I think a Republican can win.
Can you?
If I agree that partisanship is an issue, but it's much less of an issue in a city council race than it is elsewhere, and it really depends on the candidate. I mean, you saw that both with Kristen and Jay. Those are two very likable people, and that is by far the most important quality in someone running, especially for local office. So if you had a likable Republican, they do exist, then sure.
Well, certainly, I think. Well, you would agree with me that Dale fits.
He's like, what?
So what was the best idea that you heard anybody propose in the course of the campaign? Laura.
I'm excited that we have that. Well, Kristen spoke a lot about the ties between the city and their schools and families, and even having housing that's closer to schools, and just that awareness. I'm really excited that there's going to be a mom
That
who has
sensibility.
active kids, is actively a parent in schools,
And Eric Friedman
and
also.
Eric Friedman. So that's whenever she spoke about that connection. Obviously, I'm on the school board, so that resonates with me to have a really strong tie and figure out ways in which the city and the school districts can work more closely together.
Did you hear anything that you hadn't heard before?
If you go to enough forums, you hear pretty much everything. One of the things that you notice when you're listening to people who haven't been on city council before, when you're listening to non-incumbents, you hear a lot of interesting and sometimes strange ideas. What happens once you're actually on city council, you learn enormously, especially in the first year. And you come to understand that really the most important thing that you're going to do is the budget. That's really what it boils down to.
And you, of course, I think probably thought that an alternative to Cox for high-speed internet was probably the best idea that we heard.
Well, apparently it did resonate. No,
Is this a startup?
Yes. No, I thought, the idea that we need to return the decision-making back to the people was the best idea.
Whatever
No, I'm
that
kidding.
means.
That's a bad joke on a hell. But Kristen Sneddon said something no one else said, and that's to Laura's point, which is housing near schools, because we're seeing an exodus in enrollment, and that was different. So we can argue, like, what does that mean and how do you do that?
Yeah.
But no one talked about that. Everybody just followed the whole let's bring housing to downtown argument, which isn't probably not going to save State Street. It's going to take a long time. Even the developers are concerned about building housing downtown.
Yeah.
So that was a fresh idea, and it got people to look at her as an original thinker, a unique candidate. As far as the mayor's race, they all said things that were interesting and valid, and they all had good points. So I don't think there was a lot of original stuff coming out of
Did you
any
hear
of them.
anything that you hadn't that surprised you, or that was sounded like a
I,
really good idea?
there was a lot of talk, obviously, about State Street and what to do about. So, I mean, I think we were all kind of, beaten down with what are we going to do about retail. But there was talk. I think Kristen, not to praise her too much, I guess, but she did talk a little bit more about people are looking to, have experiences downtown and instead of just shopping. And these are kinds of things like that. That's not a revolutionary idea, but the way that she spoke about it, she mentioned Piccadilly Square, for instance. And so you could tell that she...
Did you go look at the Independent Archives? Learn what that was? Sorry. I had to do a millennial comment.
Right.
She was talking about a LaCroix bar downtown, right? For
what a
millennials,
great
right?
idea.
No.
Water. Go downtown to drink water. No. So just, things that people are going to be spending money on. They're not going to be going downtown to buy a hammer at a hardware store, so it's just...
I thought Hal's idea of sectionalizing State Street into 2 or 3 block areas with plazas and stuff like that, I thought that was
Like an arts district,
Yeah.
which kind of already exists, and
rather than looking at it as a whole retail strip. I
Right.
thought that was,
Let me say something nice about Hal. He said we need to come up with a 10 or 20-year economic
absolutely.
plan based on our environmental principles and goals. That was very good. I mean, he should have said that from the beginning and just stuck with that, because that's something that's original. Of course, what does it mean? Who knows, right? But at least he's talking about something that no one else is talking about, which is what you have to do if you want to separate yourself.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, we could, I guess we'll gush about Kristen a little bit more here. But looked at the other way, Jim Scafidi was the Democratic endorsed candidate there, and I think maybe the biggest surprise of all was that his complete collapse. He got less percentage of the vote in that district than Aaron Solis did in the 6th district, which
Yeah.
was hard to do since Aaron Solis did not go to a single event. What was going on there?
Kristen, I mean, I can't say enough good things about how she just disrupted this election, really, and by being inspired by the March on Science in April, and just having this kind of authentic personality where you meet her and you want to help her. I think she really just blew people away, and it allowed people like myself, who otherwise would have just sort of toted the party candidate, to think, oh, this is someone I could just, I can't not be on her side. Her connections, 30 years in the city, but not just living here, but really connecting and working with people and being on boards and schools and that kind of thing. Whereas I don't know that he had that. Jay certainly does, and I think that really matters in such a small election. I mean, people showed up for her. They didn't just vote for her. They actually came to events. And then she had a great team. She worked really hard. Stephanie Langsdorf was great. They walked the district twice. I wasn't surprised. I was surprised by the margin, for
Pretty
sure.
big margin.
But I just didn't hear much about Jim going door to door.
And Jay was a really good candidate, and Josh made the point last time that
Right.
probably Kristen and Jay would have been elected if we still
In an
were.
at-large election. That's probably true, and that was one of Scafidi's problems. He was in a district with 2 very charismatic, well-known, well-liked candidates.
Yeah.
So what happens now? Kathy's got 2 more years on her council seat.
So that council seat opens
So
up.
how does that work?
That council seat will be an open seat, and once the new council is impaneled in January, they will get to appoint someone to that seat, someone from the 3rd district.
Has to be from, so
the
Jay
city.
could not be, he
No.
would have to move to be able to do that. Do you think it'll be Sharon Byrne? Do you think she'll be Kathy's arch enemy, who has run
I would be very surprised if Sharon Murray is the next member of the Santa Barbara City
You have
Council.
heard any names, any possible?
I've heard some whispering and ideas. There were some people that might be applying, but I'm not prepared to out them on this stage because I've not heard it from them directly. I want to talk about the council race real quickly and Helene Schneider. I think that part of the story here is what's going to happen with the Democratic Party and whether they're going to get behind Kristen Sneddon. If they're smart, they will.
Yeah.
Because Kristen has mayoral potential in 8 years if she wants it. Because
Or 4 years.
no, that's a battle that will not, it's not a smart battle.
After the recall. Yeah, go ahead.
You're supposed to be an unbiased journalist,
I
Jerry.
am. These are just scenarios.
Okay. Well, I just want to say,
She couldn't figure out who I voted for based on my commentary on
No.
election night.
I couldn't.
I'm sorry, finish your point.
the Democratic Party has to figure out what they're going to do with Kristen Sneddon. We've seen divisions. They need to fix that if they want to have success long term. And Helene Schneider is sort of the biggest emblematic example of that. She had a falling out with the party. They didn't like her choices, who she surrounded herself with, her strategies. It wasn't her turn to challenge Salud, whatever. But I think Helene comes out as one of the winners on election night.
Really?
Yeah, because
Despite Bendy's abysmal performance?
well, that was loyalty, right? That was relationships. Bendy was stuck with her, but Helene got behind Kristen Sneddon, and Kristen's going to be a little bit of the legacy that she leaves. Helene also got behind Jason Dominguez. So Helene is leaving behind two candidates that were not backed by the Democratic Party, that she went out on her own and cultivated and nurtured. And so she's leaving behind a little bit of that legacy. So I don't think we should write off the fact that Helene was a bit of a winner on election night, because it validates the fact that, as you know, it's tough to take a stand and back somebody when you know that the party in power may hold
Yeah.
that against you down the road.
I-
And so that's a big deal. That's significant.
I was just wondering when did Helene back her? At what point in the?
Early.
I think it was early.
I mean, I think Helene helped convince her to run. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, very early. Helene was the first person I heard about Kristen from, actually. I mean, then Kristen reached out. But yeah, I think it's time for unity, and I hope that the party embraces her. I know that Democratic women have already been very gracious to her during the campaign, and the Women's Political Committee, even though they endorsed Scafidi, as did Democratic women, they were very, accepting of her at events and gave her kind of, just a graciousness. And so I hope that the party sees what voters saw in her. It's that she's hands down an amazing candidate and will be, by all accounts, a great representative. So
Yeah.
Next on the Kristen Sneddon show.
Can we get a fifth chair? Can we have her next week?
that's true.
So you went to Berkeley. You're a Cal Bear.
I did.
So you're familiar with the most progressive city council in California. Now we're going to have a very progressive city council. I just want to ask
That's
each
true.
of you.
I was wondering where that was going, but okay, yeah. Styrofoam bans. I don't know.
What does that mean? Does that strike terror in your heart?
I've been through enough elections now, and I no longer assume that things are going to radically change based on who won and who lost. The issues in Santa Barbara have not changed significantly in decades, and they're still going to be around 4 years and 8 years from now. I look at what this council is going to be in January. It doesn't seem terribly different to me than what the council was in 2007 in terms of the political leanings. It was all liberal Democrats in 2007.
So what will that mean for, say, housing, which was endlessly talked about throughout the campaign? What as a practical matter? What
The
does that mean?
historic average number of new units in Santa Barbara is 100 units per year.
Well, we got all this state legislation coming. I mean, what are your expectations for this group of left-wing radicals?
My hope is that some of these factions go away, that we can turn a page. And I know that's not a substantive answer to your policy question, but that's my hope, is that even though they are all progressives, except for Randy, even though he has a balanced voting record to some degree, but that these factions can we can turn a page and that they can work together really well. Which I have to say, I'm plugging a lot tonight, but the school board, we're all progressives and we work really well together. And it's good when it
And the system will correct itself. I mean, when Dale ran, he had an amazing base constituency, people in the neighborhoods who wanted something different, and they felt that the liberal Democrats on the council were not listening to them. And Dale ran and won and didn't need to raise $1 million to do it. He had a base and he knocked on doors. So the system will correct, and there will be somebody who comes forward who is able to slowly balance that out. But we're not going to have.
So what's going to happen with State Street with this council? Is it going to make any difference whether Kathy's the mayor or Frank had been the mayor or Jay had won instead of Kristen?
We don't know, but obviously State Street's going to get some attention. The wheels are already in motion. I think landlords need to decide whether they're going to triple rents or not. That's a trend that's happening, and we're seeing a lot of these storefronts. These people have an exodus. So the city's working on it. They're expediting permits. Things are already moving, and it's just going to take time. We might see some kind of housing experiment downtown, but it's just going to take a while, and it doesn't really matter who's going to be. If Angel got in there, he would.
Doesn't matter.
If Angel
How
got,
long have we been doing for 2 months?
It doesn't matter.
So Measure C was the last thing on the ballot, the sales tax, and passed by about 10 points, 55-45. But we note that almost all of the undecideds broke 15, 14%, 12 to 14 went no on that. Is that expected, or do you think people were actually listening to the arguments about it?
I have to say that I didn't really pay that much attention to Measure C because I knew it was going to pass. There was virtually no chance that was not going to pass. It was billed as this is all infrastructure, we're going to improve our streets, we're going to build a new police department building. It was just going to pass.
Do you have any fears that this new progressive council will now take the Measure C money and put it into pensions?
No. I think that,
I'm reading comment boards. Okay.
well, here's the thing. Pensions are the ultimate financial problem that the city and the state face. And sooner or later, it's going to grind us down to nothing. But I think that the people who got elected, every one of them pledged this money that comes in, the new money that comes in from Measure C is going to infrastructure, and I would be shocked if they change their minds on that.
How much more of a pension is Kathy going to get the moment she's sworn in? You should look into that. That's a good story. All right, there was other news this week, and of course it had to do with marijuana. And
So we all
the
get
city
Kelsey.
is now looking for a new bank. It's a really interesting problem because the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, says that marijuana is a dangerous drug, and therefore banks are afraid to get involved with it, but yet it's legal in California, or it's going to be legal. What's the city doing about this?
Right. So this is a problem that's been around actually for 20 years for the medical marijuana industry because they aren't really. Most of them are not able to have bank accounts. Banks will close their accounts if they suspect that. They say, I'm growing garlic. Oh, really? You're coming in every other day with $10,000 in cash? I don't think so. So they've been banks have been shutting down
The garlic growers.
The garlic growers for some time. And so now cities and counties are going to be accepting this cash that is related,
Legal.
that is legal by state law, taxes on marijuana businesses. And so they're in a situation where they need to be banking with, they need to have that figured out, I suppose. So banks are, working on this. I think all banks have people who are saying, are kind of looking into this. There was this week, the state treasury working group released a bunch of recommendations about
Controller
things
John
that they,
Chung.
yes,
Treasurer. Is he the treasurer?
treasurer, yes.
Yeah. And gubernatorial candidate. I just wanted to say gubernatorial.
Don't we all?
But that
So-
was a very substantive report. It's a lot of stuff you didn't think about.
It is, and the first thing was armored vehicles. So all of this cash, they're going to be driving around with, and having to come up, the city is going to have to come up with a plan, and that plan's probably not going to be public because there's a security concern. And a lot of these businesses, unless they have a vault, have really creative ways of keeping their cash dispersed, on their property or elsewhere.
You reported a couple of weeks ago about how Lompoc was turning into Amsterdam. Now I heard today that there's a reaction to that there's church groups and so on are protesting. What's the latest?
I had heard that there were recall petitions for the 4 city council members who supported it. My understanding is that this ordinance is the second reading is going to be read in, I think it was the 7th, it's November 7th. So, sort of a wonky way of saying, this is moving forward as far as I know. I'm sure there's going to be opposition.
Amsterdam is moving forward?
Yes, I'm sure there is going to be opposition, but I don't know how successful they're going to be at this point.
Is the new council going to be any different than the old council in terms of marijuana citing, so on and so forth? More shops downtown on State Street, housing and
Randy
marijuana shops.
Randy Rouse is probably the biggest opponent on that issue, and so he's going to speak.
He's going to be a
about
lonely
that.
guy, isn't he?
I mean,
We've been there.
Well, I think it's one
But
of
there
those.
were more than one of you, right?
Well, no, in the first 2 years, I was all alone. Everybody else was making George Bush jokes, and I'm...
Oh, really?
Well,
He bought Frank and Michael.
It
their
defies
character.
partisanship in a lot of ways. I mean, if you look at the Board of Supervisors, Janet Wolf is a progressive liberal, and she's raised concerns about.
Yeah.
And so, and you have Steve Lavagnino, a conservative who's very business friendly, who says, we're looking forward to these tax dollars. So,
Yeah. Janet Wolf running for re-election? Yes or no?
back to you.
No. All right, well, thanks to tonight's panel, Josh Molina, Laura Capps, Dale Francisco, and Kelsey Brugger, and thank you for watching. Please visit our website, newsmakerswithjr.com, where you can check out my regular blog posts on politics in Santa Barbara and beyond. Thanks to our director, Oscar Gutierrez, to our crew, Ryan and Debbie, our marketing and branding consultant, Maggie Mabuchi, our law firm, Dewey Cheatham & Howe, and as always, our top-ranking, high-powered, high-energy senior executive producer, Hap Freund. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.